Welcome to the Rosbifs Rugby Top 14 Round 14 preview. So we are now over halfway in the top 14 in terms of the regular fixtures. We did a lot on the podcast this week about it being the halfway stage and how the table should be representative. Actually, if you look at the table after 13 rounds last year, it changed completely over the course of the second half of the season. So Racing at the halfway stage were 3 points, top of the table by 3 points, and they just scraped into sixth on points difference in the end. Toulouse were only fourth at the halfway stage. Pau were looking rosy, they were sixth, and they ended up in ninth. La Rochelle, similarly, were kind of eighth, and they ended up in fifth. And it was more remarkable at the bottom, actually, because Oyonnax weren't bottom at the halfway stage and ended up 10 points adrift of 13th place. Perpignan were only 1 point above bottom place at the halfway stage and ended up 24 points clear of Oyonnax in bottom. So kind of extraordinary when you look at that comparison. Long story short, there's a long, long way to go and we can't actually really jump to any conclusions at all. Plus, for the meantime, there's some epic matches in round 14. Toulon v Racing. It feels like another week of trying to unpick where Racing are at. They really should have won that game at home to Lyon last week. Racing haven't won a top 14 game since the 2nd of November, which is crazy. More ill-discipline last week. That's a problem that's not going away. Toulon, on the other hand, pushed Bordeaux pretty close at Stade Chaban-Domas. They did get a bit of rest into some of their key players. They are still unbeaten at home this season, and they match up pretty favourably against Racing, especially now that they have Antoine Frisch alongside Lester Fainga'anuku in the centres. And that means they should be able to handle Joshua Tuasova better than most. He's the big threat, certainly in attack and kind of phase play for Racing. Such a physical presence, especially without Fiku now for about 6 to 8 weeks, maybe. Who's going to partner him is interesting then. Whether it's Sam James, I think he's still injured. It'd be nice to see him paired with Tuasova. It's probably going to be Dan Lancaster though, isn't it, in the centres. But Tuasova is the big threat, and I think Toulon can deal with that. Rosbifs, we don't love talking about matchups, kind of as a direct head-to-head. It's very, very rarely a direct head-to-head. But it will be quite nice to see Saran up against Le Garrec, both capable of some incredible moments of individual skill, and they can turn the game single-handedly. But ultimately, Saran should have a better ride this weekend. They've got a much more aggressive pack. And it was kind of up to Le Garrec, as it has been in many games this season, to try and spark something for Racing. It kind of feels like he's playing by himself at times. Not going to rule anything out, but we are both going for Toulon. Should be a double figures win, really, I think. Montpellier v Bayonne is an interesting game. 4th place going away to 7th place. Montpellier is certainly on the rise. Their defence has been very good, and they seem to have finally settled on a combination at half-back. So Stuart Hogg has really settled in at 10. Kicked brilliantly from long range last week. He ran the show quite nicely. The week before that against Racing, Bayonne obviously have their own long-range kickers in Joris Sagons and Camille Lopez. Does it imply that it might be a bit of a penalty fest, especially when you consider how strong Montpellier's pack is? They'll be looking for scrum penalties for sure. But, of course, before we get worried about this just being a kick fest, Bayonne have the best player in the top 14 at the moment. Sorelli Mangala, first player to double figures in terms of tries. They're playing some great rugby at times, Bayonne, and every time I think that they're I keep wanting to doubt them. I keep thinking they're going to trip up, but they keep pulling performances out the bag, especially in that last away game at Vannes. But can't look past the power of the Montpellier scrum. It is an almighty pack, and we're both going for Montpellier to win that one. Castres v Pau is the Rosbifs Derby, the second iteration for this season. Rich's team Castres against my team Pau. Section Pau was. I've gone all out on the stash this week after Pau's much needed win last week at home to Vannes, but ultimately they weren't really that fantastic. They did score some brilliant tries. They are capable of scoring some brilliant tries. Maybe that win will give them a bit of confidence. Could be a real catalyst for them. Especially against a Castres team that have lost 3 in a row in the top 14. Castres' seasons were going pretty well up until that point. But they're no longer unbeaten at home. They don't have Will Collier at the moment. But ultimately, I think they match up pretty favourably with Pau. Pau's scrum is a clear weak link. The line out is all right, but the scrum is a clear weak link. And Levin Chilichava is a pretty capable replacement at tight head for Will Collier. So Castres' pack is still going to be pretty formidable. Pau generally are quite a little bit lightweight, whereas Castres can be so physical at times. Like Leonie Nakarawa, still bossing it. Abraham Papali'i has been brilliant this season, the Kiwi number 8. Absolute beast both sides of the ball. Could cause some real damage against Pau. And ultimately, Pau have only mustered 1 point from their 6 away league games. Pays me to say it, but I think Castres are pretty comfortable favourites for this, so we are both going for them to win. Sorry, boys. Lyon v Perpignan is a huge game. Perpignan went on the charge, as we mentioned, in the second half of last season. They will be hoping for the same this season. It was a key win for them last week. That was their kind of first win in any competition since the 2nd of October. First win in all competitions since the 2nd of November, whereas Lyon haven't won in the top 14 since the 13th of October. But they have got 2 draws in their last 2 games. In isolation, a draw at home to Toulouse and a draw away at Racing is a pretty good result. But in the context of that run, it kind of doesn't look great. They're just not getting over the line. I can't really work out Lyon. They just can't piece it together. They've got some brilliant individual players. They are capable of some extraordinarily good rugby at times. David Niniashvili is on another level, whether he's wing or fullback. Baptiste Q at 9 is clearly brilliant. Scores loads of tries himself. Leo Burdo at 10, great start to the season, perhaps faltering a bit with his goal kicking. And Lyon just generally just seemed incredibly fallible, and they're now fallible at home because they've lost to Bayonne and Clermont at home, 2 teams that traditionally have been pretty rubbish away from home. But they've also beaten Bordeaux and drawn with Toulouse at home. So kind of can't work out their away form. Is it a case that they get up for the big games at home and maybe Perpignan could, as a not big game or a not big side, could sneak a win? Perpignan themselves are one of those teams that haven't won away. Only 1 point from their last 6 away game, or from their 6 away games this season. Rich is going logical. He's going with Lyon. I just fancy Perpignan. I think it was a great result last week. Some big players are finding some form. So Joaquin Oviedo at 8 was great last week. Ignacio Ruiz at hooker. Our man Kieran Brooks at tight head prop. Catalan Cow in some great form. Jake McIntyre is back, whether he kind of starts or if he at 10 or whether he kind of comes off the bench. He's a pretty key figure for them last year. Something weird is going to happen in this round. I think it's going to be in this game and Perpignan are going to get a win, but that feels pretty wild. Stade Francais versus UBB. UBB Bordeaux are in brilliant form at the moment. They are finding ways to win. They've just got so much depth now. We are both expecting them to rotate a bit, give a few players some rest, but the thing is their rotated side at the moment is so strong. So Luku might not play, and they might not play all of the first choice back lines, so maybe like one of Louis Valberet or Penaud might get a rest, maybe one or both of Moafana and Deporter in the centres might get a rest, but we could see the return of Romain Buros at fullback. First game since his debut for France against the All Blacks. That back five of the scrum, they can pick anyone and it's great. Even some of the lesser names like Cyril Cazot in second row, Bastien Verne, Pierre Bocheton, like these guys are not superstar names, but are just playing some brilliant rugby. And Stade, by comparison, have a lot of injuries in that pack. I don't know whether some of their players will be back. Romain Briat, cap for France last summer, he's a key player for them at the moment, but I think he might still be injured. The Stade scrum generally is not where it was last season. And that's an area that UBB are fallible, but I don't think it's, the way things are going for Stade, I don't think it's an area that they can genuinely target. And their defence isn't quite what it was last year. You would have said last year that they would be best equipped in the league to deal with that Bordeaux scintillating attack. They still have, but I think it's not been where it was last year for sure. They still have pace and tenacity in defence. Like Joe Marchant and Jeremy Ward are brilliant defenders as a pairing as well. Stad are improving generally. Rich is going for Ube Bay. They've got 3 wins from their 6 away games so far this season. He really, really likes the slight change upside that they do put out. I'm going for Stad. I think they're improving. Bit of home advantage. I think they've got just enough in attack and defence to trouble Ube Bay. La Rochelle v Toulouse is probably the game of the round, especially with how La Rochelle went in the Champions Cup, kind of back to their old ways. They rested a few players last week, which would have been needed because they had kind of went full noise for a few weeks in a row. They did lose, obviously not a great result. I'm not going to read too much into that. They picked up a couple of injuries. Dante is the most notable one. But we should see the return of their 4 key players. They're probably their 4 most key players in Winnie Antonio, Will Skelton, Greg Aldrit, Tawarika Barlow. Those are so critical to their success. It'll be interesting to see what side Toulouse send. Their big guns did get a rest over Christmas. And then Tony D also didn't play last week because of illness. I wonder if he'll be back. He should be. I think they will go near full noise, more to kind of lay down a marker than anything else. If they win this, it would be a huge statement. I think they need to be at full noise to beat what should be a strong La Rochelle side, because that Toulouse pack isn't quite the all-out wrecking ball. As brilliant as it is in so many areas, they kind of need to be all-out physical with Miafu on top of his game. They need the physicality of Cross, Willis and Ruma at the breakdown, because La Rochelle are probably one of the only teams in Europe, really, who can genuinely get the upper hand over Toulouse up front, kind of around the park and in the scrum. And the scrum is definitely the area that Toulouse are fallible. Red Awardy could really get stuck into whichever tight head plays for Toulouse, whether it's Dorian Aldeghiri or Joel Merkler. Both have struggled quite a few times this season. So we are both going for La Rochelle at home. The strength of the scrum, some of the form of some of their key players. Ehai West at 10 is in great form, kicking really well. That's quite key for La Rochelle's success. So we are going for La Rochelle in that one. Vannes versus Clermont, a really interesting one to finish up on. Ahead of last week, we were saying that Clermont were a proper contender. They had the best home record in the league, and then they lost to Montpellier. The jury is still out for me on Clermont's away form. That one win that they did get this season came against Lyon, so perhaps can't read too much into that. Where are Van at? Well, one thing we did say about the halfway stage is that kind of they are 7 points adrift of Lyon in 13th. 3 wins and 3 bonus points from 13 games does not sound great, but they have been better than that. They are. We were saying that they doesn't feel like they've been 7 points adrift of the rest of the league. They do score a lot of points. They're kind of actually just below mid-table in terms of points scored, but they concede so many. That is mainly on the road, but they just aren't shutting sides out at home. Personally, I'd like to see Thibaut Debice play a bit more. I thought he was quite good at 10. Whether he plays at 10 or 15, I'd like to see him. It feels like Maxime Lafarge, their kind of first choice 10, has slight kind of cult status at Van. I don't know whether Debice was a horses for courses type pick last week because Pau being his old club, but maybe I'd like to see him get a run. To be honest, he's a brilliant player, and I thought he kicked well, and he's capable of really good things in attack. Be interesting to see what side Clermont send. They've got depth in the pack, whichever kind of side they put out these days. But this just feels like a game that Clermont won't go all out for. The Sunday night factor as well. Long old trip to Van. If they're smart, they should go full noise because that is an away win there for the taking. But Clermont can be flaky. So we are both going for Van in that one at home. It's rare, but I've possibly gone slightly more bold than Rich with that Perpignan away win. He's gone for Ube Bay as his away win. We've both gone quite home winsy. Feels quite home winsy this week, but there was quite a lot of deliberation in there for both of us. Feels like there could be a really surprise result somewhere. Where do you think it will be? Let us know in the comments. Get in touch. Please reach out. Let us know.